and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Jaein in Seoul. Before we get started, let's first get a glimpse of today's highlights. In his second leg of his Asia tour, U.S. President Donald Trump arrives in Korea. What's on the table as he meets with President Moon Jae-in? One of the founders of the World Trade Organization says now is the worst time to be renegotiating the Korea-U.S. FTA amid heightened geopolitical tensions on the Korean peninsula. These stories and more coming right up. And of course, we start at the Blue House, where all the action is happening with President Trump's state visit to Korea. We now turn to our Blue House correspondent Hwang Ho-jun for more details. So Ho-jun, what can you tell us?
Jaein, the official welcoming ceremony took place a little over half an hour ago. As mentioned by the Blue House spokesperson earlier, the official welcoming ceremony for the President of the United States was held with all the formalities and conventions of a state visit, displaying the highest honor and courtesy, and also featuring both the traditional and modern sides of South Korea. A guard of honor and a military band made up of approximately 300 soldiers, a group of children, and the first couple of South Korea greeted the U.S. president and his wife. And instead of any other ordinary march, the official presidential anthem of the U.S., Hail to the Chief, was played in honor of President Trump as the two presidents entered the Cheonggwade grounds. Mr. President, a song dedicated to President Moon, was played upon their exit from the field after they inspected the troops as part of the welcoming ceremony. Now, a bilateral summit between the two presidents is taking place as we speak. And of course, one of the main items on the agenda will be the Korea-U.S. FTA. The Trump administration has continued to demand a renegotiation to address its growing trade deficit with South Korea in goods, even floating the idea of a complete withdrawal from the agreement. Seoul confirmed that the two countries have entered into negotiations and are considering all possibilities. As a matter of fact, President Trump was reported as saying before leaving Camp Humphreys he has a, quote, terrific meeting scheduled on trade in a little while with President Moon and his representatives, and that it will lead to an increase in jobs in the U.S., claiming that is one of the very important reasons he's here. President Moon and Trump are scheduled to take a short walk through the Blue House garden, and this will be followed by a joint press conference to announce the results of the summit. This has been Hwang Ho-jun for Business Daily.
And before President Trump arrived here in Seoul today, he visited a U.S. military base where he was met with a surprise welcome by President Moon Jae-in. To give us a rundown of those events, we have our Kwon Jang-ho at the Foreign Ministry on the line for us. Jang-ho, how does South Korea mark President Trump's arrival?
Good afternoon, Jaein. So President Trump arrived in South Korea on Air Force One at around 12:20 p.m. Now, several U.S. presidents have visited South Korea over the last few years, but as mentioned earlier, this is the first formal state visit in 25 years since George Bush Sr. came here. So state formalities meant that President Trump was met with a full guard of honor and a 21-gun salute. He was also greeted by the Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa and several senior officials. He then promptly hopped aboard Marine One, the president's helicopter that was specially brought in from the U.S., and he traveled to Camp Humphreys, a U.S. military base about 60 kilometers south of Seoul. The base has special significance. It's the biggest overseas U.S. base, costing $10.7 billion, of which over 90% was funded by South Korea.
And we heard that's where President Trump met with President Moon Jae-in in a surprise appearance.
That's right. There was an unannounced change to President Moon's schedule, and he greeted Trump at the base. It's been seen as a gesture of goodwill by Moon towards Trump, greeting him at the doorway rather than the front door as such. There's been some question marks about how close the two leaders were, and it seems the Moon Jae-in administration is making a deliberate effort to address this. And it seems to have worked. Presidents Trump and Moon seem to be in an upbeat mood as they sat down with the American and Korean troops for lunch in the military canteen. President Trump also made some brief comments to the press when asked about North Korea. He said, quote, ultimately, it will all work out because it always works out. A formal joint press conference, as mentioned by Hwang Ho-jun just there, with the two presidents is scheduled later today. This has been Kwon Jang-ho for Business Daily.
And with U.S. President Donald Trump now here in Seoul for the second stop of his five-nation Asia tour, we take a look at what he focused on during the first leg of his tour in Japan. Our Oh Jung-hee has a wrap-up of what Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe discussed in Tokyo.
U.S. President Donald Trump's visit to Japan wrapped up Tuesday morning with a strong, coordinated approach toward North Korea. Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe saw eye to eye on upping the pressure against the regime to make it change its stance on nuclear and missile development.
The regime continued development of its unlawful weapons programs, including its illegal nuclear tests and outrageous launches of ballistic missiles directly over Japanese territory, are a threat to the civilized world and international peace and stability. We will not stand for that. The era of strategic patience is over.
During the press conference, Prime Minister Abe announced additional unilateral sanctions against Pyongyang, freezing the assets of 35 North Korean groups and individuals. He also pledged to work closely with the U.S. if Japan needs to shoot down the North's missiles.
Japan consistently supports the position of President Trump when he says that all options are on the table. The discussions we had over the last 2 days have reassured us that Japan and the U.S. are 100% together. As far as shooting down missiles, we will shoot them down if necessary, but we will coordinate closely with the United States, even on shooting down missiles.
President Trump did not forget to raise the trade issue. Earlier on the same day, in his speech to local business leaders, President Trump has said that America suffers from, quote, massive trade deficits with Japan of almost $70 billion a year.
As President of the United States, I'm committed to achieving a fair, free, and reciprocal trading relationship. We seek equal and reliable access for American exports to Japan's markets in order to eliminate our chronic trade imbalances and deficits with Japan.
During the U.S. president's two-day visit, the two leaders also spent time building personal ties through informal activities. Playing golf together and chatting over meals, President Trump and Prime Minister Abe proved their alliance and friendship is solid and strong. Oh Jung-hee, Business Daily.
And to tell us more about the meeting between President Moon Jae-in and his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump, Professor Kim Se-won from Ewha Women's University joins us in the studio today. Hello, Professor.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so what can we expect from Trump's first ever Asia trip, especially in regards to U.S. trade with the countries that he's visiting?
Mr. Trump's purpose of visiting Asian countries is clear. Correcting U.S. trade deficit problems and generating more jobs in the United States. So the real meaning of free trade and fair trade by Mr. Trump is decreasing trade deficit with particularly China, Japan, and Korea, because these three countries altogether covers over 60% of the U.S. Trade deficits. So particularly Korea is about to begin renegotiating FTA with United States. And Mr. Trump or U.S. President visit to Korea itself strengthen U.S. FTA renegotiating strategy.
Now, I know we heard this in reports earlier, but as we know, Trump was in Japan before coming to Korea today. And he obviously discussed some trade issues dealing with Japan as well as China. So what were some of the issues that were on the table when he was in Japan?
Japanese trade surplus against the United States over $70 billion, which is more than 3 times larger than that of Korea's trade surplus with the United States. So Japanese Prime Minister Abe greeted Mr. Trump with a warm welcome because maybe he wanted to avoid a trade-related agenda at the meeting with Mr. Trump. But actually, Mr. Trump separated North Korea-related issues and trade issues. He raised the problems of Japanese trade surplus with the United States, and then he blamed the U.S. Japanese corporations and governments together. I believe that he will do the same in Korea.
So as we know, the summit is ongoing between Presidents Moon and Trump. So what are some of the issues that are going to be discussed here?
It is pretty sure that Mr. Trump wants to take a preemptive action to have a better position in renegotiating FTA with Korea. And it could be exaggerated speech or exaggerated gesture to take advantages of Korea's difficult situation. Mr. Trump is particularly interested in more opening Korea's agricultural market like a beef and automobile market, service market, and steel markets together.
How do you think President Moon will respond to his exaggerated
well,
way
it depends.
of conversing?
I believe Mr. Moon is also a great politician and diplomat. So he has his own way to react smoothly to Mr. Trump's exaggerated speech and action.
Now, at this point, I'm wondering, what kind of impact will today's summit have on the Korea-U.S. FTA from here on out?
Well, there will be official hearings from general public in the next week about the way of renegotiating FTA with the United States. But I believe that the way of renegotiating FTA should be straightforward. Like we admit, trade surplus with the United States has been doubled from $10 billion to $20 billion level in the last 5 years. But we also have to, on the other side, point out that Korea is contributing the job creation of the United States. Korea is directly investing in the U.S. over the last 5 years, over $51 billion. On the other side, U.S. only directly invest in Korea less than $20 billion. Also, if we include a huge amount of military-related item imports from the United States, the trade surplus with U.S. increases over only 40%, not doubled.
All right. Well, I guess for now, we'll keep a close eye on what comes out of today's summit between Presidents Moon and Trump.
Right.
Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you very much.
The National Assembly's Budget Committee is continuing its deliberation of the government's multi-billion-dollar budget proposal for next year. Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun and Finance Minister Kim Dong-yeon are fielding questions from rival party lawmakers on the $386 billion budget. The government and ruling party are again expected to stress that the government's income-led growth policies and people-centered investment will be able to boost the people's livelihoods and safety. But the opposition will likely step up their rhetoric, criticizing the government's plan to increase the number of public sector jobs, as well as to sharply hike next year's minimum wage. After the general meeting, they will conduct a more detailed review ahead of the December 2nd deadline. Budget deliberations will also get underway at relevant National Assembly committees, including those of Finance and Defense. Korea's Fair Trade Commission has fined 3 foreign auto parts companies a total of more than $33 million for rigging their bids for contracts. The FTC announced the fines on Monday against Japan's Denso Korea Automotive Corporation and Hyundam Industrial Company for colluding on bids to supply engine fuel pumps to Korean carmakers from August 2007 to February 2009. In another case, Denso Korea and American firm Delphi Powertrain Systems Korea were found to have joined forces in separate bids to supply a variable valve timing system between 2009 and 2012. The commission found the firms agreed to split the bids and help each other win their respective contracts, while others took part in the bidding on false pretenses to lower prices. Denso and Hyundam were each fined more than $15 million, while Delphi Powertrain was fined $3 million. Let's now get a quick check on how the markets fared here in Seoul today. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi was down 0.16%, finishing the day at 2545.44, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq also ended lower by 0.38% to close at 701.14. On the foreign exchange counter, the Korean won strengthened to 1,111.91 against the greenback. Stock trading was mostly flat today as local investors took to the sidelines in light of President Trump's visit to Korea. Most large caps dropped on Tuesday, with market kingpin Samsung Electronics surrendering 0.5%. SK Hynix and Hyundai Motor also ended down. Now, you'll remember the Kospi had hit a milestone at the end of last month, breaking past the 2,500 mark for the first time. On the back of such bullishness, retail investors have been taking out more loans in search of higher profit. But results have not exactly been to their liking. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
Korea's benchmark Kospi broke past 2,500 points in October as it surged over 5% in a span of a month. With that, the country's equity market saw roughly $9 billion in average daily trading value last month, the highest in about 2 years. This is also a 33% hike from the same time last year.
More people are investing in the stock market and preferring riskier assets. This is increasing liquidity in the stock market.
As the Kospi had been breaking through record after record, retail investors in particular have been bullish. Data from Korea Exchange shows the balance of credit loans taken out by private stock investors shot up to about $7.8 billion as of October this year, up about 29% from December last year. While retail investors were risking more aggressive forms of investment, results were not as satisfactory. The 10 stocks most purchased by retail investors handed them losses of about 0.5%, while returns from their top 10 stocks in net selling reached nearly 15%. Institutional investors, on the other hand, reported an average return of about 15% in their top 10 stock picks, while foreigners logged gains of around 6%. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
The U.S. Supreme Court has dismissed an appeal by Samsung Electronics upholding a multi-million-dollar patent award to Apple. On Monday, America's top court declined to hear the Korean tech giant's case. Samsung was challenging a lower court's reinstatement of a $120 million patent award for its use of features including slide to unlock, autocorrect, and quick links. Samsung had claimed these features were obvious and therefore not subject to a patent. In response to Monday's ruling, Samsung said it would allow Apple to unjustly profit from this patent while stunting innovation and placing competition in the courtroom rather than the marketplace. A U.S. consumer magazine has heaped praise on Korean TVs, calling them the best TVs on the market in a comprehensive review of 250 different models. Consumer Reports named LG Electronics' signature OLED TV W as best TV overall, while it named Samsung 75-inch UHD TV was also named the best jumbo-sized 4K TV. It hailed LG and Samsung's wallpaper TVs for their slimness and high dynamic range technology, which enables the screen to display more vivid colors. The magazine also advised consumers that now is the time to buy a 4K TV, as prices have been falling quickly. Trump has long called for a renegotiation of the Korea-U.S. FTA, pinning the blames on that deal for America's trade deficit with Korea. And that matter took center stage at a meeting of trade experts from around the world. Our Cha Sang-mi got to sit down with a former WTO official for his take on the topic.
Ahead of the U.S. President Trump's state visit to Korea, the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy invited trade experts from around the world to Seoul on Monday to discuss an inclusive trade policy and the future of global trade. Among them was one of the founders of the World Trade Organization, James Baucus, who had something to say about the timing of the renegotiation.
This is absolutely the worst time to be negotiating on the terms of the chorus. Korea and the United States need to stand together and need to be seen as standing together for all kinds of geopolitical reasons, including some right next door.
Baucus said the policy of the United States on different issues alters from day to day, even from hour to hour these days, and so does its view on KORUS, the 5-year-old trade agreement between Korea and the U.S.
At first, the president wanted to withdraw, then he wanted to renegotiate. His first list of negotiating issues involved 40 or 50 things he wanted from Korea, but he did not have a list of anything he was willing to give Korea. This is hardly the basis for a negotiation.
Regarding the growing protectionist movement by the U.S., Baucus said any trade deals, including NAFTA and TPP, should be resolved based on the rules of the World Trade Organization, which the negotiating states are members of.
WTO members are now speaking up. Korea has been in the forefront in speaking up, but I don't think any of them have spoken up nearly enough against this type of action by the United States. Nor have they said to the United States, enough is enough. We're simply not going to tolerate this. We'll figure out a way to go around you.
Baucus underscored the independence and impartiality of the organization and advised countries to push for a reasonable trade policy. Cha Sang-mi, Business Daily.
More companies are being exposed by the so-called Paradise Papers, which are 13 million documents that have revealed their secretive offshore tax havens. Apple is one of the latest in the spotlight and has been found to have a confidential new structure that would enable it to continue avoiding billions in taxes. The Paradise Papers show the tech giant managed to dodge a 2013 crackdown on its controversial Irish tax practices by asking law firm Appleby to help it find a tax haven. As a result, $252 billion worth of untaxed offshore cash was moved to the Channel Island of Jersey. Experts say Apple hasn't done anything illegal, but its tax arrangements in Ireland have been criticized by U.S. and European authorities. Youth unemployment remains a major social issue in France, with more than 1 in 5 young people without a job. Apprenticeships are emerging as a possible solution to the problem. Our Elliot Kim has the story.
French President Emmanuel Macron has his work cut out for him if he is to cut youth unemployment. He has his eyes on adopting proven apprenticeship programs to get there, but social prejudice remains a tough barrier. AFTROL runs 50 training centers. Among its current recruits is a class of apprentices studying for a qualification that they hope will land them jobs as project managers in the manpower-hungry transport and logistics industries.
Our figures have been clear for several years. More than 80 to 95% of young people are in employment 6 months later. What else needs to be said? Apprenticeship works.
Despite a wealth of evidence showing the country's apprentices have the best job prospects, OECD figures show that young people who struggle at school are turning towards them less and less, with the 2014 figure down to 162,000 from 225,000 10 years earlier. The problem is the notion of apprenticeships being a second-choice path towards a job. That limits the number of youth willing to join programs. Gabriel Schumacher is the logistics director at BSH, which delivers goods across Europe and has been working with AFTROL and taking their apprentices for years.
We have not placed value on practical jobs, technical jobs. And eventually, if you don't give some recognition to those jobs, then you're in trouble.
While there are plenty of positive anecdotes, only 7% of young people in France are enrolled in apprenticeships, despite neighboring countries with lower unemployment doubling that figure. A one-time student turned apprentice and now BSH employee notes his positive experience.
I would say don't hesitate to do an apprenticeship, just go for it. It gives you more later than just studying. There are more opportunities with apprenticeships than just at school.
With the country's youth unemployment rate already down from 23.4% at the turn of the year to 22.5% in September, apprenticeships could be what gets the country under the 20% hump. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today. But we'll be back tomorrow with more of the day's top business stories, so don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.